Hey everyone, Charlene Ortiz here. I wanted to finally get to filming a part two of my video series, I guess, of the time period that I was in a cult. Again, I apologize, it's not great lighting, but again, right now I can be outside and not be disturbed or disturb anybody. But yeah, so I wanted to film a part two. I haven't been feeling well the past few weeks, which is, nothing new. So I haven't really had the time to sit down and do this. But I don't remember exactly where I left off in my last video, but today I wanted to focus a little bit more on relationships and money in the church, what the relationships were like with me, what dating my husband was like, what friendships were like, leadership, all that stuff. I know I mentioned in the first video that this church, the International Churches of Christ, has a Bible study series called First Principles. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the time period I studied the Bible and just the relationships, what my relationships were like in the church. And what I guess the time, what it was like for me when I did the Bible studies, with the women in the church. I think I mentioned in my last video that when I was picked up for my first church service, the woman that picked me up, her name was Annette, who actually ended up becoming an amazing friend to me, probably one of the best friends I've ever had in my whole life, even to this day. I don't know if I can say I've had a friend as good as Annette was. But I did mention also in my last video that often, the general population, the members of the church, often are sincere, loving, amazing, generous people, which is why a lot of them are in the church, because they want to follow God and the Bible and, do the right thing. It's easy to manipulate them for money because they do want to help, the poor, or, whatever they say the money is going to. Like they really do want to make a difference in people's lives. As far as the Bible studies are concerned, the general population, like for example, like for me, when I studied the Bible with people, when I did Bible studies with people after I became a member, I sincerely believed that I was saving their soul. I sincerely believed that I was helping these people, escape hell and, a life of sin and pain and suffering, whatever. But I sincerely believed in what I was doing. I was very passionate. But unfortunately, we are working, for the upper leadership is what we're doing. And again, I compare it to like an MLM. The people on the bottom are working, for the people on the top to make lots and lots of money while they're getting like no benefit, zero benefit from it. But that's very much, how this church is designed. So anyway, my Bible studies, it took me maybe a couple of months to get through the Bible studies, which in their timeline, they would probably consider that to be a long time. I was stubborn, I had a lot of issues to work through, a lot of sin, all that stuff. But to be honest with you, I don't remember every specific Bible study. I don't remember all of them specifically. But when they do the Bible studies with, incoming members, hopeful new members, there's always at least 2 people there, sometimes 3 or 4 people there. And obviously just having that, the majority, having 3 or 4 people against one person, it's easier to manipulate and convince the person that they're living a life of sin and that they need to, give up everything that they have and, be completely committed to the church. Well, again, they say to God, but what they really mean is the church. So one thing that they do really encourage once someone becomes a Christian and gets baptized. I remember after I got through my Bible studies, everybody's required to go through a water baptism. A lot of Christian denominations will argue that you need to be baptized to be saved, and many will say you don't need to be baptized to be saved. But like a lot of different denominations and religious arguments, it could go on forever. But this Church of Christ in general, because there's the Church of Christ, that's just kind of the normal Church of Christ, and then there's the International Churches of Christ, which is the one that was a lot more cultish. But Church of Christ in general, they do believe that you need to be baptized in order to be saved. So I got baptized. I remember it was on a Easter Sunday, and I was 22 years old when I got baptized. So this would have been 23 years ago, almost exactly, I guess, because we just had Easter not too long ago. But it was on Easter Sunday, I remember. And the day of my baptism was a very exciting day for me. I felt like, finally I'm going to start living my life the way God wants me to. Finally, I'm going to start fulfilling my purpose in life that I've always, had ahead of me. And I was very excited, about my future and what was to come in my life. Well, they very quickly, when I was an official member of the church after getting baptized, they very quickly wanted to put me into leadership. So they very quickly put me into leading a group in the campus ministry on De Anza College, because I was a student there at that time. Another thing that they do encourage new members is to move in with other members of the church if you are single. And I did move in with 3 other women at that time, one of them being Annette, another woman named Justine, who again ended up being one of the most amazing people I've ever known in my life, even to this day. I'll always be grateful for the things that Justine and Annette taught me. And another girl named Renee. Renee was, now Annette and Justine were in their 30s. I was, again, only 22 at the time. And there was another, they call each other brothers and sisters, so I'll use that terminology. Just, for the sake of, I guess, just how I remember it. So there was another sister that lived in that household. Her name was Renee, and she had a lot of issues. And she did not like me when I moved in. She did not like that there was somebody else younger living there. She didn't like the fact that I was in better shape than her. She just did not like me. She felt really threatened by me. And we butt heads a lot. Now, during that time, I'm normally the type of person, if somebody is disrespectful to me or gets stupid with me, I'll go off. I'm ready to throw down. I'm ready to fight. I can't contain myself. If I don't like you, I don't like you. It's obvious I don't like you. But because I had become a Christian, I had let go of all my old ways of being confrontational, of fighting. I mean, not that I would get into fist fights. I'm not talking about that, but I am confrontational when someone is disrespectful to me, for no reason, when I've done nothing, to them. I can be very confrontational about it. Well, with her, I very much held my tongue, because I was now a Christian, and you were supposed to let go of your anger and let go of those old ways. I look back, now, had she treated me now the way she treated me back then, I definitely would have done something about it, because she was just very disrespectful with me. Again, very just jealous, competitive. She didn't like me being around the boyfriend that she was dating at the time. And she didn't even like me saying hi to him at church. Like, she would confront me later and say, I saw you talking to Steve, and I just, didn't feel like it was appropriate. Just really, really dumb shit, and I tolerated it at that time, because that's what a Christian is supposed to do. Turn the other cheek, right? Anyway, she was a bitch. She did end up leaving the church. Again, she had a lot of issues. She had a beautiful 4-year-old daughter that was incredibly smart. a gorgeous little girl, like a really pretty little girl. And she was very smart and insightful and a very impressive young child. And she did not like being a mother to this child. She just, the room that she lived in, because we lived in a 3-bedroom apartment. I shared a room with Annette. Eventually, Annette and Justine switched, and I shared a room with Justine. Well, anyway, Renee had the master bedroom with the bathroom because she had a little girl, and she just kept that room so dirty and disgusting. And she was just, anyway, she was a bitch. She was, just a ridiculous person. But there was a lot I tolerated in terms of how people treated me when I was in that church. Again, just for the sake of, containing my anger and having self-control and discipline and, doing what pleases God or whatever. But so anyway, I moved into that household almost immediately after I got baptized and was put into leadership for a campus ministry. And after that, I was pretty much kept in leadership for the remainder of the time that I lived in the Bay Area and was a member of that church. There was a brief time period when my family tried to deprogram me, and basically that's just when they try to get ex-members of the church to show you the truth about the church and get you out of the church. And they call them deprogrammers because, you've been programmed by the church or brainwashed. And that did give me some doubt for a little while. It did make me question things for a little while. But again, because I lived in a household surrounded by members of the church, eventually I ended up, the people around me were able to convince me that, is Satan trying to attack and, trying to get me to fall away from God and all that stuff. So I eventually just, decided to stay committed, to the church. So shortly after that happened was when I met my husband. Before I met him, one thing that they really, really encourage in the singles ministry is dating. They want single people to be going on dates with each other every weekend, and not necessarily like in a romantic way, but say, you met a brother at church and he was really nice and friendly. He might say, hey, you want to go on a date on Saturday? And it was very casual. There was no obligation. There was no, there was no expectation or anything like that, which in one sense was kind of nice because you were able to just get to know people on, again, a very casual, friendly level, no expectation of sex or anything like that. So to a certain degree, that was something that I did kind of like, but I just didn't care to date at that time. I really did not want to. I didn't want a boyfriend. I loved being single. I was a new member of the church, and I just wanted to learn more about God and focus on that and school and all that stuff. But they really pushed me, to date. And so the dating, like when you do go on these dates, everything has to be very pure. Like everything is like you always go on double dates in order to reduce the risk of any impurity. And to them, impurity is something as innocent and simple as a kiss, because they say one kiss can lead to this, can lead to that, whatever. So the only thing you could really do if you were in like a relationship, a romantic relationship with somebody, is hold hands. That's all you could do. So about a year and a half after, into my membership of this church, I met my husband. And when I first met him, we were, friends. We went on a date as friends, but we definitely clicked right away. We definitely had a great energy together. I love the way he was. I love that he was funny. He was kind of ghetto, rough around the edges. He grew up in East LA. So, I love being around him, and we clicked. We really clicked right away. And so we were friends for about a year, until he asked me to be his girlfriend. And then we started like dating romantically. And Joey, what are you eating? Stop it. And so my dating relationship was definitely very unique and very different, because again, you are required to be pure, completely pure. And it definitely is a challenge. It really is a struggle, because after a certain point, you do, want to get physical, because especially if you're attracted to each other, you connect, on even a spiritual, much deeper level. It really is a challenge. And there were times, I guess, we would cross lines and we didn't realize we had crossed certain lines, and we would get discipled about it, or even rebuked about it, and just, the relationship was very controlled by the church. Like every aspect of your dating relationship is controlled by the church. When you can get engaged to be married is controlled by the church. We dated for almost exactly 2 years until we got married. And when he asked me to marry him, we got married 4.5 months later. In this church, once a couple decides that they want to be engaged to get married, they don't waste time when it comes to having the wedding and planning the wedding. And a lot of that is because of the temptation, to be impure. And so the sooner you can get married, and then now you're free to have whatever type of physical relationship you want, the better, so you don't fall into impurity before you actually get married. And so I personally am not the type of person that ever really, I wasn't the type of person that planned my wedding, at the age of 12. I just wasn't like that at all. So I didn't really care to plan my wedding. If it was up to me, we would have eloped to Vegas and gotten married by Elvis. Seriously, I just did not care. I just wanted to get married. I was in love. I knew this was the man I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, and that was all I cared about. But the church wants you to have a wedding, a big wedding, and witness to God and everybody that you're getting married and you're making this lifelong commitment now. And planning my wedding was definitely something that was very stressful, and I did not enjoy it at all. So there's a lot of regrets I have about the planning of my wedding. My bridal shower sucked. I just, again, it isn't necessarily the greatest memory for me, that time period, which is supposed to be one of the best memories of your life. That time period when you're planning your wedding is supposed to be one of the funnest, most exciting times of your life, but it wasn't. It was very stressful, and I just didn't enjoy it. My wedding day, my sister was crying because I was getting married before her. My mom was upset that I was marrying somebody in the church. They weren't happy at all, and they made it very obvious they weren't happy that I was getting married, and that was hurtful. So my wedding definitely wasn't any type of dream wedding or anything like that. We didn't have much money. We paid for it ourselves because, we didn't have money. And there were a lot of people in the church that did help us with a lot of things that I did appreciate. I am grateful, to the people that did help us during that time period. But again, it just wasn't something that I really cared to put a lot of energy into. But so anyway, the wedding day itself, I mean, I do have good memories. It was fun, again, because we were committed members of the church. There were people there that we really loved and cared about and supported us. So, it wasn't all bad. I mean, there were a lot of good memories from my wedding. But again, if I could go back in time and do it all over again, it would not have been at all what it was, because it just wasn't really what I wanted it to be. But but that's just how it is when you're a member of this church, or really any type of cult, is that any event in your life is controlled by what the church or the leadership of that church says that it needs to be. My husband had to get permission to ask me to marry him And, you know, he had to get like the okay. So every aspect of your life in that church is controlled. One thing that when you're a leader that you have to be committed to is the Sunday leadership meetings. So as I mentioned in my last video, you have Sunday service and you have Wednesday service. If you're in leadership, then you have Sunday afternoon leaders meeting. Not only that, you were also expected to actively be studying the Bible with non-believers. You're supposed to be actively sharing your faith, you know, and trying to help other people become disciples. Like, it isn't just the church services that you're expected to be committed to. Like, every second of your life has to be committed to this church and bringing more members into this church. And so, the leaders meetings were definitely a place where a lot of control and manipulation and emotional damage happened. The leaders definitely, you know, had a higher expectation, were held at a higher standard. There's one leader I will never forget. Her name was Antoinette Hua. And man, was this woman a bitch. She was just a bitter, spiteful, hateful, evil bitch. And I have moments in my life, memories in my life that I think of where I wish I could go back in time and react, you know, the way that I should have reacted back then or whatever. But those leaders meetings or the encounters that I had with this woman are times where I wish I could go back and punch her in the face. I mean, she really was just such a spiteful bitch. She really was. Just cruel. And every meeting, she had to degrade us, put us down, tell us how selfish we were, just manipulate us with guilt. There was one woman in the meetings when I was part of a certain group of leaders. There was one woman that Antoinette would always pick on. Her name was Teresa, and she's since unfortunately passed away from breast cancer. But my memory of Teresa is somebody who was a very kind, humble, loving, sincere woman that really wanted to serve God, that was an amazing friend to the people around her, that was incredibly generous, and just a very humble, meek person. And I really think that Antoinette was jealous of her. She had so much animosity towards this woman, and she would tear her down all the time. So many meetings, she would completely just tear this woman down, tell her how selfish she was, tell her that she was evil, tell her that she was, you know, that she wanted all this self-glorification and was focused on herself being glorified instead of God. And I just never saw it. I never saw it, because whenever she would tear her apart, I remember being in that meeting thinking, you know, I don't see that in her. But you are so programmed and so manipulated that you are taught not to question what the leadership has to say, because they're at a higher level, they're closer to God, so you don't question their judgment, you don't question what they say. But again, if I could go back in time to one of those moments when she's completely tearing down Teresa, I would punch her in the face. But unfortunately, that was something that ran rampant in that church. A lot of people that were in very high leadership positions that were just evil, spiteful, manipulative, controlling, bitchy people. And obviously, that's why they're in the position that they're in, because you have to be someone that's able to do that to people without a conscience. So that way people can be committed, you know, to the church. And not question, you know, anything that the church demands of you. You have to be someone that is that cruel and has no conscience about it. You know, so there were a lot of people in the higher leaderships, like the sector leaders, that were like that, or even house church leaders that were like that. So another thing that they do in the church is they'll change you around a lot. Like if you have a certain discipler, I don't know if I mentioned this in my last video, but you'll have like someone who's assigned to you that's called a discipler, and this is someone that you answer to and you meet with every week and confess all your sins and talk about how you're doing spiritually and all this stuff. Calm down, calm down. So I have the two dogs out here with me, and they're going crazy right now. So if you guys hear that in the background, that's them playing. So anyway, I lost my train of thought. I do that all the time. But anyway, I was talking about disciplers. So, they would often change your discipler. You know, you would have a certain discipler for a few months, and then they would change and give you another discipler. And it was just, and the way they made these decisions was just really stupid. Like they you know, they would say, oh, my decision, for this person to disciple you was inspired by God and blah, blah, blah. When really there's really no reason. Calm down. Calm down. There's really no reason for them to pick a specific person, or anyway, it's just stupid. They would change groups a lot. Like they would put you in one group for a while, then switch it up and put you into another group for a while. And I'm not really sure why they did it. Maybe it was because they just wanted to expose you to as many members as possible and build as many relationships in the church as possible, because the more tied in you are to that church with the relationships, the less likely you are to leave. Because when I was a member of that church, the relationships that I had in that church were very important to me, because they were my family, they were my friends, they were my life, my everything to me. So the thought of leaving the church was, you know, something that would be extremely difficult for anybody, you know, because you're leaving your livelihood, like all your friendships, you're leaving all that behind, and that's what they want, you know, obviously. So anyway, after my husband and I got married, we were put in leadership right away, together as a married couple. We also led together as a dating couple, but we led a singles ministry. We led a campus ministry. And then my husband started to have some personal struggles. And I'm not going to talk about that because that's his personal struggle. And I'm not going to talk about that because it's, you know, personal to him. But he started to have some struggles, and his commitment to the church was really starting to be compromised, I guess. So that was when everything kind of started to change, or the dynamic of our role in our relationship with people in the church really started to change. I, you know, personally was still very committed. I still wanted to go into full-time ministry with my husband, even be a missionary, maybe in a Latin country, especially since my husband spoke Spanish. So, you know, I was devastated, you know, with that. My husband's commitment was really starting to falter, I guess. So, there's so much in between that happened. But again, these videos would be like 5 hours long if I talked about every detail. So it's just too much. But anyway, so my husband and I eventually decided we were going to move back to Ohio because I wanted to go to school. And go into medicine. I wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to go into medicine, and I knew in the Bay Area, because it was so expensive, I wouldn't be able to do it, you know, because, you know, you have to work full time. You know, when you live in a city that's so expensive, both partners have to work full time in a city like that. Especially now, because it's way more expensive to live there now than it was when we lived there. So we eventually decided to move to Ohio because I had family there, and, you know, it was a familiar place and it was an affordable place to live. I also wanted to be close to my mom and see if I could try to mend some things, my relationship with my mom. And so we moved to Ohio. And at the time we moved to Ohio, we weren't really doing that well spiritually. We had been pulled out of leadership. Our commitment just was not 100%. And we were definitely starting to have our struggles. But for me, I always wanted to be committed to the church. I always wanted to, again, just be full force, in the church, no matter where I lived. And so we moved to Dayton and immediately, found a church in Dayton. And we kind of felt a new spark when we got there. We kind of felt like, maybe this is a good change for us. Maybe, it'll be easier for us to recommit. It's a new environment, different people. But the church in Dayton was not doing very well. There was, at that time, I think this was 2000, let's see, we got married in 2000, I think it was 2003, 2004. I can't remember the exact year, but a letter came out to the whole church from the very, very upper leadership, like the world leaders, that there was, I guess, a lot of sin going on. And, Kit McKean, who was, the number one, the CEO of the church, if you were to give him a title, was stepping down because of sin, and they needed to get their focus back and blah, blah, blah. And the church started to change drastically at that point. A lot of things really started to change. So it was a huge turning point for that church. So a lot of churches didn't respond very well to the letter, and a lot of churches didn't. They really struggled, and they just started not doing well. Well, the Dayton church was one of them. So the people in the Dayton church, again, they just weren't really doing that great. And so when we were trying, and we were ourselves not doing very well, so when we needed the encouragement, or we needed somebody who was spiritually mature to kind of help reel us back in, that just wasn't really present in the Dayton church. So we started to fall further and further away. We started to stray further away from the church. And I started going to school, and I certainly was not as committed as I was in the Bay Area. I wasn't going to Sunday services or Wednesday services for a while. I was still, in touch and communicating with members of the church. And again, in my heart, I always wanted to go back and get that, and get that commitment again with my husband as a couple. I always wanted that. And so it really was a struggle for me, to be dealing with my husband's challenges and his lack of commitment, but I wanted to be committed and go back. So I felt really torn during that period when we lived in Ohio. So we lived in Ohio for 3.5 years, and that's when I started getting sick. And at the time, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I just thought that I was tired or whatever. I have another video that I did on my fibromyalgia story and how I started to get sick, and I go into details in that video. So anyway, we had decided we were going to move back to the Bay Area, and hopefully, maybe being back with the people that originally helped us to become disciples, maybe being around them again will help us to recommit and, just get our spiritual life back together. So we moved to Ohio, and we ended up moving to LA. We were going to move back to the Bay Area, but we ended up getting into an accident on the way with the U-Haul trailer that we were hauling. We had a Nissan Pathfinder at that time that was hauling one of those trailers, and it flipped. And so it was a horrible accident. My husband was the one driving it. I was driving the Toyota Corolla that we had at that time. Thank God the cats were with me, because one of the cats was with Saul in the Pathfinder for a little while. Then we switched it up and put both of them in the car with me. Thank God they were with me. But long story short, my husband didn't get hurt. He was okay, thank God. Because he could have died, that could have been the end. But he was fine, he walked away from it without a scratch, like literally. So anyway, that accident deterred us. You know, it was a huge, what's the word I'm looking for? Factor. It was a big factor in our decision to stay in LA and not go to the Bay Area. Because my brother-in-law lived in LA. We were able to live with him for free for a while. And so, and my husband also knew somebody in LA that had a business that he could go work for. So we thought, you know, I think financially it's just better for us to stay here. And we ended up staying there, obviously, for 9 years. So, all right, well, I'm going to end this part 2 with that. And then I'll do my next part will be my experience with the church in LA, which is obviously vastly different than what it was like in the Bay Area. And then I'll talk about what ultimately motivated me to just leave the church altogether, you know, and leave religion, you know, as a whole. And my choice to, you know, no longer practice religion or any type of religion wasn't necessarily because of that church. You know, it was more, I guess my husband and I went through a period of, you know, trying to figure out what we were doing, what we believed, you know, and I'll do another video on that someday, but there were other factors involved as to why I am no longer a religious person. I no longer call myself a Christian. You know, I don't believe in God, you know, I mean, I believe that there might be something out there, but I certainly don't hold to the same beliefs that I grew up with. And again, I have my reasons for that, you know, and I'm actually happier that way, you know. I feel free, you know, now that I've let go of religion, I feel a lot freer, you know, to understand life on a different level, to understand people on a different level, you know, what have you. So, all right, guys, I hope everyone's doing okay. I'm, you know, we're all hoping that, you know, this time of quarantine is going to start slowly coming to an end little by little for everybody. I know Vegas, we're planning on opening up small businesses next Friday with limitations. I got an email from my hairdresser saying, if you want to make an appointment on Friday, you know, come on in, which I might go see him because my hair looks terrible. So that's exciting. You know, it's going to be awesome, you know, for small businesses to start, you know, opening and people getting back to work again. So let's hope that, you know, we're on a good positive trend in terms of, you know, it's everybody just getting back to normal. Well, I mean, I know they keep saying a new normal. Yes, for a while it will be, but I don't think it'll, you know, be like this forever. I'm sure we will hit a point where we will be able to go back to you know, coronavirus status, you know, so, but Vegas is going to take time, definitely. But so, you know, I'm excited that, you know, next Friday, things are going to start opening up again. So that's great. And I hope things are going okay for you in your area, wherever you live in the country, in the world. You know, I hope that you're holding up. I know some parts of the world are in complete lockdown, and I know that's very challenging. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to watch my video. I hope it's interesting for you. Again, just a little smidget of my life, you know, part of my life that I just want to share. So, okay, remember, take care of yourself, protect yourself physically and emotionally, and don't forget, your health is your most valuable asset. Invest in it. Bye-bye.